Welcome to the first 2022 episode of Ready to Launch, a podcast series on entrepreneurship in the MENA region. A joint collaboration between Riyadh, a Wilson Center podcast, of which I, Merissa Khurma, am host, and the Straight Up Startup from Amman, Jordan, with host Rajae Sahouri. And Happy New Year from all of us. We're kicking off the year with a deep dive into the latest findings of ASDA'A BCW Arab Youth Survey with its founder and president, Sunil John. We will get a rare look into the 2021 findings on where youth stand today in the Arab world, their hopes and aspirations for the future, but also the challenges they face, namely in the labor market. And in addition to chatting with Sunil about the survey, we will also talk to a young entrepreneur about the findings, Eli Habib, CTO and co-founder of Anghami, the first legal music streaming platform and digital distribution company in the Arab world. Sunil and Eli, welcome to the show. And I'm going to start with you, Sunil, and the Arab Youth Survey. You founded the Arab Youth Survey. You've compiled very impressive data that we at the Wilson Center's Middle East program follow every year. So tell us more about the survey. How do you conduct it, and why do you do it annually?
Thank you, Merissa, for first of all, organizing this podcast on such an important subject. I also want to thank Wilson Center as well for doing such an important initiative. I think in terms of why we did this survey, way back, we started this in 2008. The initial idea came simply because, as a firm, when we consulted with clients in this region, as you know, we are one of the leading public relations consultancies globally and also in the Middle East and North Africa region. One of the key questions that came up is, what is this region really all about? And when you really look at it, 400 million people in a vast range of countries, but what defines the Middle East and North Africa region is its young demographic. 60% of the population below the age of 30. So when you really look at, if you want to understand the Middle East and North Africa region, or what's called the Arab world, you need to understand the Arab youth. 200 million people, the critical mass that influences the success of governments, of businesses, of institutions in this region. But when we really looked at that particular demographic, such an important demographic, one of the biggest problems that everybody faced was the lack of data. I attended many conferences where people said, we need to be able to unlock the potential of the Arab youth, the youth dividend, as they said. But nobody really knew what did the Arab youth want. And that inspired us to start the survey way back in 2008. And we have actually consistently built on that first survey of just 9 countries to 17 countries across the Arab world, in the Gulf, in the Levant, and North Africa. And today, in 2021, we launched our 13th edition, which is the largest study of its kind of the Arab world's largest demographic. And we conducted, of course, face-to-face interviews with 3,400 Arab youth in these 17 nations. And over the 13 years, we have conducted over 40,000 interviews, all face-to-face. Remember, Merissa, this is not online surveys. They are face-to-face, so much more credible in terms of information. So that's how we started. And to your second question, which is, why do we do this? I think we do this because it is extremely important for governments and businesses to know what's out there on the field. What do young people say? And the survey really provides that multiple impact for the voices of these Arab youth. What we do is bring that to policymakers in government, to business decision makers, so it informs their policy making and the strategy that they develop. And that's why we bring this every year. Of course, survey done by PSB Insights, which is a global strategic research and analytics consultancy, and we've been working with PSB over these years.
So before I turn this to Rajae, because I know he has a set of questions about the survey as well. Yes, it's absolutely unique to the region that we have such a large youth population. And I've been following the survey. It's fascinating data. And you said that, the target audience for this is primarily also governments and policymakers. So what are some of the reactions that you get from some of the governments of the countries you're surveying?
Oh, in the beginning, Merissa, nobody really took much notice of our survey in the first couple of years. But something happened in 2011 where the survey became a necessary reading for government, businesses, institutions across the world, not just in the region. When you looked at the data in 8, 9, and 10, if somebody read those findings, and they're all available on our website, arabyouthsurvey.com, you could see the Arab Spring happening. Over 90% of the Arab youth in 2018, our first survey said, one of our biggest desires is to live in a democracy. So when you really look at that, you can, this is trackable data. Mm-hmm. And if you really look at the insights, you can see what's happening on the ground. And we've been looking at those insights and how the reality of the situation is changing on the ground is fascinating to see. So how have governments reacted? I think they are now looking at it extremely seriously. We do special briefings for governments, especially in the Gulf, in some parts of North Africa as well. But we are also invited to international forums such as the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C., to think tank forums, including yours here in Washington, D.C., as well as with others in London and in other parts of Europe as well. Because this is an important subject. The Middle East and North Africa is an important part of the world. And it's not just, governments in the region, but governments across the world want to know what is really happening in the Arab world.
Absolutely. And it's very encouraging that governments are listening and that they're taking this seriously, because we often heard youth being framed as a constant challenge rather than an opportunity. And I'm glad that you continue to do this annually, so you're also able to see trends. Rajae, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Sunil. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your time. And I want to tackle now the survey with you. And so the survey title was "Hope for the Future," reflecting the optimism of youth, but also provides insight on issues such as unemployment, which is a significant challenge in the region. And specifically in my country, Jordan, where youth unemployment stands today at 50% according to the World Bank data. And Sunil, I fall into that segment, especially the target segment you have initiated. And we see that a lot, because I also studied here, and I see my fellow peers and graduates going through this hardship. So how serious is the unemployment? Can you tell us more about the findings related to youth unemployment?
Absolutely. I think, Rajae, you mentioned some very pertinent numbers, especially. Globally, youth unemployment, as per World Bank, is roughly about 13.5%. In the region, as per World Bank again, it's around 25%, the highest in the world. And as you just mentioned, in your home country, in Jordan, it's likely to be about 50%. In the populous countries like Egypt, it's close to 40 to 50% as well. So this is a very, very big problem. And when we asked the cohort in the 13th survey, we did a survey in June 2021, what came out, the finding is that 84% of the youth across the region are concerned about unemployment, which means, Rajae, that's 8 young people out of 10. This is the number one problem in the young people's mind. And when you track the data, when you go back to 2016, that number was 75%, still high, but went from 2016 to 2021, from 75 to 84%, 9% increase is significant. So it's a very big problem in people's minds.
Yeah.
I'm gonna Rajae, do you have a follow-up?
No, please go ahead, Merissa.
Yeah, just zooming into this, Sunil, because we at the Middle East program have been really focused on the unemployment challenge through the Workforce Development Initiative, and we published a report trying to understand this workforce formula. Why do we constantly see, as you said, the MENA region with the highest unemployment rate worldwide? What is it that's not being done on the part of the government or on the part of the private sector? And we analyzed it in terms of, this workforce formula of supply and demand. And on the supply side, there's the education system. So I wonder if this is an issue that came up in the survey. Are Arab youth satisfied with the education system? Do they feel that it's preparing them for the challenges of finding a job or the workforce?
I think, Merissa, that's you're absolutely on point on actually delving into the source of the problem. I think when you really look at all of the problems in the Middle East, the one solution, as I say, the top three solutions are education, education, and education. Seriously, that's the one thing that governments and private businesses should be looking at. Mm-hmm. And delving down into the numbers as well, as much as the young people in the region are concerned about unemployment, they are extremely dissatisfied with the quality of education they receive, especially in the context of the COVID situation that happened. Remember, we did this last survey in June 2021, and what we found is that 9 in 10 young Arabs, 87%, are concerned about the quality of education that they receive. And that anxiety is spread across the region. Sometimes we see differences in the Gulf, in the Levant and North Africa, but here 85% of the Arab youth in the GCC were concerned about the quality of education. Wow. Similarly, 88% in North Africa and a similar 88% in the Levantine countries, including Jordan, of course. And young people say that the COVID-19 pandemic has further worsened the education experience. So when you really look at it, I think that's where governments need to be able to look at. Is the education system producing young Arabs that are right for the market? Are they making them ready for the jobs of the future? The world's changing with new technologies. But what about these young people? Are they ready for that? That's a big challenge that I think a lot of governments are grappling with, and they're doing a lot of effort there. I must again commend these governments for having addressed that issue. But have they addressed it enough? Are they agile? Are they fast enough? Because the world's moving at a huge pace. Will the region be left behind in the new, digital age that we are entering into? That's a big, big question that decision makers need to address very, very quickly.
Absolutely, and those numbers are also really high. Like, that's very high dissatisfaction with the education system. We also have seen that, and that's from our research and available data, that most youth tend to fall into the public sector, employment, because that's what they've seen their parents do, or sometimes that's the messaging that they hear in school or at home. So how do you encourage youth to take more leaps of faith, more risks, and maybe try the private sector? What does the survey tell us about that particular aspect?
It's a very important question, Merissa. And while I did share with you some depressing data, here's some very interesting and a much more positive data that I'd like to share with you. I think in the past, we've seen over the last 13 years that youth across the region, with absolutely no exception, preferred a government job. That was their ambition because it was steady, it was permanent, and they were happy and safe to have that government job. But as we know across the region, governments have maxed out. They can't create more jobs. And obviously, the young people, they're much more pragmatic in their approach. And they have seen that they need to be able to do something about creating jobs themselves. And we have seen over the last 3 years, a definite drop in a preference to work for government. For instance, in 2021, 42% prefer to work in government. It's still high, but it's a drop from nearly 50% 3 years ago. Working for myself or my family has risen from 16% in 2019 to 25% now. That's the entrepreneurial spirit that is rising up among the Arab youth because they want to find a solution for themselves. Right. Working for the private sector, of course, Merissa, has dropped a bit from 28% to 23%. So we are seeing a definite increase in Arab youth looking at working for themselves. When we ask the question, of course, another important data, very positive, when we ask them, do you intend to start your own business within the next 5 years? And the answer was 43% said, yes, we want to start a business in the next 5 years. And look at the jump, 29% in 2018, moving to 43% in 2021. This is a real beautiful green shoot finding of our survey that young people want to start their business. And then, of course, Merissa, we come to the question of what do they want their governments to do to help them create these jobs. And here, they talk about financial services, the lack of financial resources to do that. And what can governments do to be able to cut some red tape and provide more loans for these young people to start their businesses?
This is very interesting. And like you said, there's sort of a mix of depressing data, but also some hope and silver linings. I think I'm going to pass this on now to Rajae to bring Eli into the discussion as a young entrepreneur from the region. So on to you, Rajae.
Thank you. Welcome, Eli. I'm going to give away another like a brief intro about you. So Eli is the co-founder of Anghami. He founded it along with his partner, Edi Maroon, and Anghami means my tunes in Arabic. And as we all know, Anghami is the leading music streaming service in the Middle East. And in less than a year since launching, Anghami has reached over 3.7 million users and streams close to 5 million Arabic and English tracks. Eli, welcome and thank you so much for your time.
Hello, Rajae. Thank you for welcoming me. I guess the data you just put is really seriously old data. When we launched, like probably a year after launching, we currently have close to 58 million songs and over 70 million users. So numbers significantly changed since then, thankfully.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's of course seeding, and we see you on we see Anghami listed on NASDAQ, but like we mentioned that as part of you guys' first launch. So this is very inspiring for other youth to see how that has come across, and which actually brings me to my first question about you. And as we said, as this kind of like your first success, like Anghami is actually your fifth startup, which probably most people don't know about you. People know you from Anghami. So can you tell us more about your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes, thank you. Honestly, I don't know the word entrepreneur. I mean, when I was young, growing up in Lebanon, it was kind of war. I mean, there was the war, and it's like ongoing type, whatever, some type of war. And I actually found in computers, some, computers allowed me to use my imagination and create something, because I couldn't actually go create the games and play on the street like every other kid in the world. So I started on that early on, and then prior to going to university, I had decided what I wanted to do, and I was pretty good at it. And I started building software and selling it. And I've always been doing that and creating products and selling them. and marketing them. So I never knew the word entrepreneur. I knew the word is like I'm doing something that I enjoy and I can actually make money out of it and I can be independent. So I started my first company when I was before university, my second just out of university, and it's been ongoing since then. I've made multiple companies in totally different areas, from accounting to restaurants to e-commerce to portal to a telco company. I mean, telcos as in selling, creating services for telcos as in SMS, MMS gateways, and then Anghami. For me, it was always. I mean, I've never been employed in my life because I always felt I can do something. Maybe I was precocious in some way or another, but I represent right now what the people now in the region they want to prove themselves through doing something.
This is so inspiring, Eli, that you're doing this because you've followed your passions and you're doing something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy. And this is very much in line with what we've heard from Sunil about where youth are at in terms of starting their own business and being self-employed. But the data that we've also looked at indicated that only 8% of Arab youth think that it's easy to start a business. So there are challenges there. This is very much in line with the research that we have conducted in our own analysis at MEP. Did you face challenges starting your businesses, and what do you think youth are confronted with?
I guess when I started, it was way harder to create a business. When I started Anghami, raising funds was kind of extremely hard. When we raised our first $1 million, it was kind of like amazing that we were able to do that. Right now, you can raise way easier. The point is, it's always hard when you're not into it, and it doesn't get easier when you're into creating something. It just gets you get comfortable with it. I think for many it feels hard, and it does feel hard, and it has to feel hard. Otherwise, if it feels very easy to start a business, you'll see everyone having their own businesses, no one working in corporates. It does feel at the beginning that you have to jump, you have to trust in everything, and to actually decide that you want to jump over. And generally speaking, what makes it harder is that you're in your comfort zone, and the parents generally do not actually tell people, oh, go start your own business. I mean, that's not what people want to want to do. So I have no idea what would be the metric in terms of the comparable of the 8%, let's say in Europe or the US. But I tend to believe that when I started my own business, the number of people who wanted to start their own was extremely smaller than that number. I mean, everybody told me don't. And on every new business, I was getting, offers to join a company. And I was I trusted myself. I trusted I can do something. I did not exactly, think about passion back in the days, but I thought if someone else was doing it, then I can do it. Right now, I feel that the youth feels it's overwhelming to start a business because they look at the complexities of things. But then again, after working in other businesses, it gets easier for them. And that is what makes that number higher. From when you're in university, the university does not exactly prepare youth to actually. This is the relevant to the education that Sunil was talking about. University does not prepare you to jumping over into the workforce. It's only when you are in the workforce that it sounds interesting for you to jump over.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's in line with the Arab Youth Survey data on this issue. And it's also a matter of the pedagogy that we've seen in Arab educational systems, which is very much focused on memorization versus critical thinking, or even taking risks. Sunil mentioned that in the data, referencing wanting to work with the public sector or with the government, that some of the reasons are, have to do with that job being steady, and not many people see that with the private sector. But you make a very good point about this learning by doing in the private sector prepares youth with the necessary skills to basically be able to jump out into the ecosystem and start their own business. Rajae?
Absolutely, Merissa, and I totally agree in terms of I totally agree with also Eli how everyone needs to learn at the job. Not everything goes into university. So Eli, Sunil has mentioned that, or like Sunil has mentioned from the Arab Youth Survey, that the youth interest in entrepreneurship rose from 29% in 2018 to 43% in 2021. In your opinion, why this big jump? Is it the pandemic that propelled people to take more risks? What changed from your perspective? Can you let us know more?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's success stories from other people. What gets someone want to create a business is not that the someone that he doesn't know or the is has created a business, and because it does not inspire them exactly. But once you start actually hearing success out of someone that you're probably familiar with, that you've read about, that you see growing, that success inspires you. The point is that there have been a lot of success stories, whether it's small, whether it's someone that creating his own online shop and selling on Instagram and doing business and growing, or it's that big company that started competing with Uber, like Kareem, and then eventually grew, and like everybody started using it in around the region. People want to actually started associating themselves with brands that are closer to them, that they know and they knew that came from the region. And then they started to understand that, okay, maybe we can also do something similar, because they've seen it started from small and big, growing up to be large. And that actually gets you to figure out, maybe also I can do it. And this is relevant also to the percentage of people that said they want to work in the government, and then now it's lesser than that. Why? Because it's in the government usually indicates that safety. So okay, I'm going to work in the government. I'm going to be safe. I don't have to worry about anything. But at the same time, it's probably the inverse of ambition. The more people wanted to be entrepreneurs, the more they actually figure out, okay, maybe I can do something on my own, because that might be a boring job at the government. So those two numbers correlate together, indicate the correlation, indicate that people really aspire to do more. And obviously, the more that the education system is going to get better, as indicated earlier, the more the youth are going to have a higher confidence of jumping earlier on. And for me, it's like that education thing, we need to keep on hitting on it, talking about it, because this is the bigger problem in the room. This is the biggest elephant. This is the number that really you look at it and figure out, oh my God, where are we still? And when you talk to people that come up from university, and you realize that they don't know how to sell. Not
Right.
sell as in sell something in the shop, but they know how to sell their ideas, sell themselves, have confidence, and being able to pitch an idea. This is something that university does not teach you. And this is where, since they don't teach you, you will never have confidence and jumping out of comfort zone, whether it's a government or whether it's a safe desk job.
Thanks, Ali, for these points. I want to go back to first the importance of sharing success stories and role models. I think this is so important. But I think it's equally important, and that's why we have this podcast in the first place, to make sure that young people from the region hear the entire story, that they're not only seeing the tip, right, or the success, because it is a journey of struggle, of challenge, and ups and downs. And I sometimes it doesn't seem that Arab culture is conducive to sharing stories of failure or challenge or shortcomings. So how do you talk to other entrepreneurs about ensuring that you are one of these role models and that you're sharing your entire story, the ups and downs?
Thank you for that. I think you that is a very, very, very valid point. People don't want to start because they're afraid of failing, and that is a kind of major problem we have because we don't talk about failures. Failures are. I'm not saying people should fail. What I'm saying is like if people talk about their failures, they will teach others about what to do and what probably to avoid. And this is a problem that our heroes are all people who've suddenly somehow succeeded and they don't actually want to talk about the problems that they faced. This is a stigma that we have in the Arab world because people are afraid to discuss failures, and we're getting a bit better. Not that better, because if you look at stories, people tend to want to hide or ashamed of talking about that because this is part of Arabs as a I don't want to say as a species, but as a culture. Our culture usually is conducive to success. People want to talk about the successes. They don't want to talk about failures. Now, entrepreneurs in private circles started doing that, right? They started doing that because they trust other people who are entrepreneurs. They don't trust people who aren't really entrepreneurs. So in private circles, we've done multiple, smallish events or gatherings whereby we've spoken about problems, our failures, about issues that we can't really talk in the public, not because we don't want to talk about them, but because they're still not very tolerated, or I don't know whether the word is tolerated or not, but people are still ashamed of talking about that. So generally speaking, when you see a startup, let's say an entrepreneur launching a startup, you have a lot of press covering the launch of the startup. When a startup dies, nobody talks about it. I mean, you can't find a press article talking about a startup, that decided to fire the employees or terminate services and all of that. But you fortunately enough, in the past few years, there has been a couple that has been discussed, but still it needs much more than that. And what also we need to understand, what also we need is that the people who failed in their businesses to explain what they should have done better. That empowers the people to understand that, okay, those people failed, but then there is a post-mortem and there is a way for all of us to learn from those failures.
Absolutely. And what I'm hearing here, which is really interesting, is that it's not just a reluctance of Arab youth or Arabs in general to share or talk about failure, but that also the space to share those stories or shortcomings is also limited, that it's not well received. And so this is a really interesting point because, the media should be able to delve into some of these stories to understand what's going on, because as you stated in the end, it's about lessons learned. And that's what propels you forward and helps you with your business. Rajae?
Absolutely, Merissa, and I totally agree also with Habib that it's also a culture of having it like normalized more often rather than shaming it. So, Eli, thank you so much for your time, and also Sunil. And I just want to ask you, Eli, for your before you launch words of wisdom, what would you like to say to men and women in the region or like everywhere who wants to start a business but they're a bit reluctant, they're hesitant? What would you like to say? What are your words of wisdom?
Rajae, can I come in on one aspect before Eli answers that important question?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. Eli is a very modest man, and I think the story of Anghami, as Merissa said, the importance of role models. Anghami started less than 10 years ago, and today it is the number one music streaming platform in the MENA markets. It has 58% market share, and it is larger than Spotify in this region. What Eli and his partner, co-founder Eddie Maroon did was to create a world beater. And you mentioned the listing. Anghami will be the first Arab tech brand to list on NASDAQ in early February.
Wow.
And that is something we should really celebrate about, because these role models will, as Eli rightly said, will encourage more young people to say it can be done. Mm-hmm. And Anghami and Eli are great examples that we should all celebrate.
Thank you for sharing, Sunil. We all know our region needs a lot of these success stories and a lot of this good news.
Thank you. Going back to the question of Rajae, so I honestly feel that we have a tendency to work alone and not share even ideas. People are afraid to launch because they're afraid to fail, and they're afraid to share and get feedback on their ideas before launching. So generally speaking, at most you're going to find someone that have an idea, working on an idea, and ends up staying a few years working on the idea because he does not want to share this his thought process with others, because he's afraid that his idea might fail, or he's afraid his idea gets stolen. What I would want to say to youth who's listening and who have ideas in mind is like, please go out, please write out your idea, talk about it, launch it, build it, create anything, create something small, validate your ideas. And if it works, then get people around you to embrace you, to give you feedback on how you can make the idea better. And then go out and make it. But first, maybe learn from others. I started and I've built my career by doing everything on myself, and I made 1,000,001 mistakes till I got to where I am right now, and I'm still making mistakes by the dozen. But the point is, it would be great if one realizes that, back in the days, you used to go practice in a business with a certain goal of, I want to build something like that business later on, right? It might have been your, I don't know, creating shoes or creating anything. That thing that was that a lot of people started doing back in the days, whereby people would learn with the aspiration of building. You go work in a place with the aspiration of building a better business after it. So that is what we should do. And we should be talking to each other. We should be sharing lessons and sharing failures. And eventually, I think we will be better off. The youth surveys, the Arab youth surveys over the past few years, as Sunil indicated, have shown that people have hope right now. The youth have hope significantly better than before. Even though through COVID, we have better hopes. Those hopes we will build on top of successes and of top of learnings. And hopefully, if we push a bit the education system, push a bit the governments to really make a change in the educational system, I think we're going to be just fine. I am very proud of the people who work in Anghami, who wanted to learn, and who really are doing great. And we're competing with giants in the world from the region. People. We built a product by the people, from the people, to the people. All Arab people have created it, and we're able to scale and thankfully get to NASDAQ. This is an indication that everyone, can build an idea and make whatever impossible actually very possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eli. This was so uplifting. A perfect start for our 2022 podcast series. And everything that you and Sunil have talked about so far, get us back to this theme that I think has emerged from the episode, that things are not static in the region, that there is hope, and that culture in particular is evolving around entrepreneurship, around education, around how to share, how to work with others, and how to fail and be okay with it, even if it takes a little bit of time. So on behalf of Rajae and myself, thank you so much, Eli. Thank you, Sunil, for your time and your insight, and congratulations once again, Eli.
Thank you, Merissa. Thank you, Rajae.
Thank you.
This podcast is funded by a grant from the United States Department of State. The opinions, findings, and conclusions of this podcast are those of our guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the U.S. Department of State.